Hello, my name is Matthew Batista. I work in the engineering group and my role is open source compliance specialist. I am going to be explaining to you the precautionary measures Teradata takes with respect to the distribution and installation of different flavors of R software for both the Teradata and Aster platforms. During this presentation, I will be discussing several topics. I will start with the objectives of this course. I will then provide you with the legal definition of open source. I will explain the concept of the general public license and the implications that it has in relation to R. I will discuss the R offerings we are supporting, and finally, I will introduce the Teradata guidelines that must be followed with R and the consequences of not following these guidelines. This webinar should increase your ability to describe R licensing, follow the guidelines for installing R software for both Teradata and Aster, understand when and where a Teradata employee can install R products, and describe the legal repercussions of not following the R software guidelines for both Teradata employees and contractors. Now let's take a look at the legal definition of open source. An open source license allows the software to be freely used, changed, and shared by anyone. Open source software is licensed under an open source license. People in the open source movement like to say free is more about free speech than free beer. Teradata takes precautions regarding R because it is licensed under the General Public License, or GPL, a specific type of open source license. First, I will discuss open source licenses in general, then move on to the GPL in particular. There are several types of open source licenses. Some licenses have very few restrictions, such as requiring the recipient to keep all copyright notices in place upon redistribution so that the original authors get proper attribution. Other licenses, called copyleft licenses, are written in such a way to force the recipient to share changes or additions to the copyleft software in source code form. As a result, if it is determined that a company with proprietary software has combined and distributed their proprietary software with copyleft software in certain ways, the company would be expected to make the source code for the combined product available to everyone at no charge, subject only to the terms of the copyleft license. Please note that copyleft is a play on the word copyright. It is the practice of using copyright law to offer the right to distribute copies and modified versions of a work while requiring the same rights be preserved in modified versions of the work. Software copyleft licenses require that information necessary for reproducing and modifying the work must be made available to recipients of the executable. The source code will usually contain a copy of the license terms and acknowledge the authors. I will now discuss the GPL in more detail and explain the implications for R. Remember, the GPL stands for General Public License and is supported by the Free Software Foundation. The GPL has strong copyleft license terms, which are referred to as its viral effect. If we combine or modify GPL code with Teradata code in certain ways, then recipients of that combination would receive the Teradata code under the GPL license. Those customers or other third parties would be entitled to 1. Receive the source code for the Teradata code, and 2. Redistribute the Teradata code without paying any royalties to Teradata. In other words, the Teradata code would become GPL code. Unfortunately, those certain ways are only vaguely defined by the GPL. To some extent, the definitions rely on an area of copyright law called derivative works that has many shades of gray, especially when it comes to its usage in the area of software. To avoid losing all the value of our code, Teradata takes extraordinary steps to avoid combining and distributing Teradata code with GPL code in ways that could trigger the viral effect. One of these areas about which GPL scholars argue is whether dynamically linking proprietary code to GPL code creates a derivative work under copyright law, and thus requires the proprietary code to become GPL code. Teradata is taking a conservative approach by assuming that it does. Therefore, if Teradata code must be linked to GPL code, we avoid the viral effect of the GPL by 1. Not being the one to distribute the GPL code to our customer's site, and 2. Not being the one to combine the GPL code with the Teradata code at the customer site. As a final note, the GPL does not restrict what the final recipient does with the GPL code. As a result, the viral effect of the GPL does not occur without distribution. In other words, distribution triggers the viral effect. When customers combine Teradata code with GPL code at their site, the Teradata code does not become GPL code because it is not distributed after the combination. When Teradata combines Teradata code with GPL code solely for internal use, but does not distribute the combination to any third party, the Teradata code does not become GPL code. This is because we are not distributing the Teradata GPL code combination. Let's take a look at our R offerings. R is a software environment for statistical computing and graphics that was developed as an open source project using the GPL license. R is an integrated suite of software facilities for data manipulation, calculation, and graphical display. It runs on a wide variety of Unix platforms, Windows, and Mac OS. As I mentioned earlier, it is GPL code. R is distributed via the Comprehensive R Archive Network, or CRAN. CRAN is a network of FTP and web servers around the world that store identical, up-to-date versions of code and documentation for R. The foundational components of R include the R interpreter and the R-based packages. Revolution Analytics is a company with a corporate mission to foster the R community as well as support the growing needs of commercial users. They are focused on building the next generation of advanced analytics, supporting R's language transition from an open source academic research tool into commercial applications for industrial use, and helping companies bridge the gap between legacy and modern data infrastructures. Revolution Analytics has a commercial R offering called Revolution R Enterprise, or Revo R. Revo R includes the R interpreter, base packages from the Comprehensive R Archive Network, CRAN, as part of its package. In Revo R, Revolution Analytics dynamically links its proprietary algorithms to the CRAN components at runtime. At minimum, the CRAN portions of Revo R remain GPL code. Because of the dynamic link to CRAN portions, many in the open source community would say that all of Revo R should be GPL code, despite Revolution Analytics' opinion to the contrary. Teradata now has 3 different offerings for our customers that are using R. Teradata 1410 and Revolution R Enterprise 7.1, Teradata 15 and open source R, and Teradata Aster 6 and open source R. At present, these offerings will include reliance on dynamic links between Teradata proprietary code and R. Failure of a Teradata representative to follow the rules could result in some Teradata code becoming GPL code. Under no circumstances should you ever provide a customer with Teradata code linked to GPL code. Some future Teradata Aster code releases may implement other means of interacting with R. A data pipeline, like a fork and exec, is a recognized means of proprietary code interacting with GPL code that does not trigger the viral effect. Fork exec is a commonly used technique in Unix or Linux whereby an executing process spawns a new program in a different memory address space with no static or dynamic linking requirements. Operating in a completely different address space with no linking whatsoever is a key requirement when protecting valued intellectual property from the viral terms of GPL. Only when all offering releases have implemented such viral effect averse means of interacting with R code will the rules be relaxed. I will now discuss the Teradata guidelines around download and installation of R and the consequences if the guidelines are not strictly adhered to. To avoid possible viral effect of R, Teradata representatives are to abide by the following rules. And for the record, Teradata representative refers to employees including customer services and professional services, contractors, and similar agents of any Teradata affiliate. Teradata representatives are not to redistribute or install Revo R or CRAN software. This includes hosting, downloading, or otherwise providing the software to any third party. Additionally, after the software has been obtained by the customer, Teradata representatives are not to install the software on a customer machine. Just saying, I am doing this on behalf of the customer does not change anything. You are not permitted to download or install on behalf of the customer. The rules do not prohibit Teradata representatives from using the installed R environments on Teradata-owned systems as part of pre-sales, development, testing, or support-related work. The rules also do not prohibit Teradata representatives from installing Revo R or open source R on Teradata-owned machines for Teradata's internal use. Revolution Analytics has implemented a message that appears upon download during the PUT-based install and within the documentation as shown on this slide. As indicated in the message, do not proceed to download or install the software under any circumstances. Remember, you are not allowed to download or install software on the customer's behalf. All Teradata employees have a duty to protect Teradata's intellectual property. Given the potentially serious consequences of losing the value of Teradata's intellectual property, failure to follow these rules is subject to disciplinary action, including the possibility of termination. In summary, the GPL has strong copyleft terms which may expose valuable Teradata IP without proper precautions. CRAN R is licensed under the GPL and forms the basis of the Revolution R Enterprise distribution. Installing CRAN R or Revolution R Enterprise on a Teradata system is prohibited until all Teradata offerings implement a means of interacting with R that does not require a static or dynamic link.